Hi everyone, and welcome to the SearchPilot Control Mode launch. My name's Will Critchlow, and I'm going to be guiding you through what we're talking about today. Before we get into the main presentation, I thought I'd just address a little elephant in the room. I have something of a tradition in weeks of big presentations of getting injured on the basketball court. Some of you might remember that we used to run the Search Love conference series, and it seems I went back through the text messages repeatedly, had to tell Lindsay, who used to run those conferences, that yet again, I've got a black eye or a busted lip, or as it turns out this week, a busted nose. It's not broken, a little bit painful, but that's why I'm held together by tape. Anyway, after that little bit of light-hearted entry, and before we get into the meat of what I'm going to talk about today, a couple of smaller announcements. The first is that our free SEO Testing 101 course is now live. If you go to searchpilot.com/SEO-testing-course, you can see the hard work of my colleague Craig Bradford, who has put together an epic intro to all things SEO testing. So whether you work with SearchPilot or not, you can get to grips with the basics of the 101 level stuff on that course. Completely free. Also, while you're there, check out the rest of our website. Until yesterday, our homepage looked like this. But now we've launched the new site. And if you head to searchpilot.com, you can check out everything that aligns with all of the things that we're talking about here today. So what are we talking about? Well, for most of you here today, search is your biggest channel. It's where you get the majority of your new customers, but it's also your least understood. You know that feeling. I hear it in meetings all the time. We don't want to touch that part of the site, just in case we hurt traffic. Too many teams are forced to treat their SEO programs like unstable Jenga towers, scared to touch the wrong bit in case the whole thing comes crumbling down. And that fear keeps many teams defensive, keeps them in react mode. Instead of trying to grow organic traffic, they settle for just not breaking anything. But that's not going to work anymore. The protection mindset that maybe worked when things were stable has left us completely unprepared for all the disruption that we're seeing today. And thanks to AI, the nature of search is changing. We're seeing a collapse in clicks from traditional results, but at the same time, an explosion in new searches people didn't even know they could do before. We're not just talking about keywords, we're talking about paragraph length queries. This is what I call the next trillion searches, and it's a shift that's bigger than desktop to mobile. So what do? We have to change our entire approach. Stop trying to predict the future and start experimenting to discover it. Because here's the truth. Despite what you might think, or you might be led to believe, search is controllable. And it is a performance channel. But that control doesn't come from the channel itself. It comes from your approach to it, from building a true experimentation program. And that's why we're here today. We're here to show you how to get that control. We're here to show you how to get into control mode. So we talk about taking search out of react mode and putting it into control mode. But that's not just a slogan. It's a system, it's a workflow that we've built to give you the confidence and authority to drive real attributable growth in this new era of search. And the system has three parts that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about new tools that we're launching that power each stage of this journey. First, we'll talk about how to design tests with confidence, how to build robust, trustworthy experiments from day one, even before you launch them. Second, we'll be talking about how to measure what really matters, moving beyond averages, seeing the true multi-dimensional impact of those changes, and getting to unbiased truth. And then finally, we'll talk about how to scale those learnings, how to connect the insights across the entire organization, turn one-off tests into strategic, data-driven programs. Because you don't need more SEO tactics. There's plenty of blogs for that. You need to know which ones actually work. And that's the system that we're launching today. Welcome to control mode. Let's get started. The first one that I talked about, this first pillar, is about designing with confidence. And we're doing this in a world where search is changing. I talked about AI. It's not just that. We're moving from 10 blue links to all kinds of search enhancements. And in particular, in e-commerce especially, the move to product search. And AI is, of course, changing the game. This is Gemini, but we see similar things in ChatGPT and Perplexity and more. And it combines all of those things with a more conversational approach. And that conversational approach is what's leading to the end of keywords, really. We hear about these paragraph length queries. Some of them aren't even queries, really. They're, again, conversations. And in this environment, we can't really know what ranking factors are or mean anymore. Even rankings aren't particularly a thing. It's more like recommendations, and it is more like conversations. So the first thing I want to talk about that's brand new in our approach to this is what we call Metrics Explorer. And this is about investigating which of the various metrics might be valuable to run tests against. And we've announced various things. As I said, the SearchPilot website is all new, but has a load of great content on there. You head to the resources section. You can check out our information on GEO, A/B testing, and product search testing, and more. But what we see here in Metrics Explorer is the ability to explore those different metrics for the pages that you're hoping to run a test on, so that wherever you're pulling that from, whether that's coming from your analytics data, Search Console, Merchant Center, or segments, even like LLM traffic, you can understand very quickly whether it's likely to be testable, the shape of that information, and put together tests that measure the things that matter to you in that particular hypothesis. And all of this is directly attacking the least understood part. I mentioned organic search being your biggest channel, but your least understood. You can't control a channel you don't understand. And so by designing these trustworthy experiments before launch, pulling together siloed data into a multi-metric test, then you get to really design those powerful tests. As soon as we get into thinking about all these different metrics, whether it's visibility, clicks of different kinds, clicks on particular kinds of search results or from particular channels, we're unifying data across lots of different sources. One of the things that we have discovered in our work doing this is that these things aren't always desperately well correlated with one another. And actually, that's part of what makes it powerful. The fact that these are different data sources and they are different to one another, they respond differently to experiments. That's why you need to attack the multi-metrics. But what it does mean is that if you do it naively, if you just bucket on a single metric, typically clicks, then some of these other metrics aren't going to be balanced between the control and variant group of pages that you're working with. What we see here is our ready-to-test analysis for a single metric, showing a well-correlated site section, showing that there's a high correlation between the control and variant buckets, and saying, this is ready to test on. But we need to go further than that, and we need to start building pre-launch checks that do that bucketing with a multi-metric awareness. So building balanced buckets, not only of clicks, but also of, for example, impressions or merchant center clicks or whatever other metrics are going to be important to that hypothesis. And one of the cool things that we've discovered in the kind of statistical R&D side of things is that it's actually possible to build balanced buckets across multi-metrics. If you do it naively, it won't happen. You'll end up with balanced buckets for the primary metric that you care about and everything else potentially unbalanced. But because it's such a high dimensional space and you're working with so many URLs typically, it is actually possible with a little bit of care to build buckets that are balanced across those multiple metrics. So you should do that, we think. To wrap out this section, the other kind of insights that we've been accumulating that have fed into the design work that have gone into all of these product features that we're talking about today is every single testing program is battling to run more tests, build that testing cadence, and get more of them to be conclusive, to get more statistical significance on those tests. And we've got a couple of features like very specifically targeted at that as well. The most interesting that I wanted to talk about is the pre-test outlier removal. So we have for a long time had the ability to remove outliers from running tests. These are surprising changes. Typically things like a particular product gets a PR coverage spike for whatever reason. Something unpredictable happens during the test, and we need to be able to extract it out, rule it out of the analysis, and dive into the analysis without that data so that we can get some real insights, even though something unexpected happened during the course of the test. This is something a little different. This is about the fact that when we do these analyses, sometimes we find that even in the pre-test period, things are dominated by a small number of URLs that get traffic that is disproportionately unlike everything else in the site section. And if we don't discover that, and if we don't remove them, it can mess up the analysis. So you can see here that this particular analysis has a recommendation to check for outliers, because even the best bucketing that we can come to is not as correlated as we would like it to be. And you can kind of see them diverging in this area here. And what this automated analysis is doing is then it's saying, well, look, you've got some options. You can run with the baseline bucketing. You can run with a balanced removal of outliers, or you can maximize the correlation of the buckets by removing all of the outliers that we've identified. And there is a balance to strike here, because some of these outliers might be contributing meaningful amounts of traffic in aggregate, and we don't want to remove everything. Obviously, we need some remaining URLs to run the test on. But by giving these powerful tools, we can run better tests. And finally, in this part of the section, we are focusing very much on the speed and cadence of a testing program. And we've been building tools that can help articulate and understand how many tests can be run at once on a particular site section. So in our thinking, a site section is something like your product pages, for example, your PDPs in e-commerce language, or if you're in travel, something like your routes or your location pages. And on the very large websites that we work with, very often these can be split into multiple simultaneous test sections, and you can run simultaneous tests on those, and you get limited only by your ability to come up with test ideas and execute and build those tests. So what we talked about in this first section is Metrics Explorer for working with multiple metrics from different data sources, whether that's Search Console, Merchant Center, Analytics, or segments of any of those. The crucial multi-metric bucketing that is needed if you're going to work with different data sources and different segments of those data sources. The removal of outliers even before launching an experiment, and the ability to run multiple tests at once so that you can design and build a testing program to hit higher cadence. And put all of that together, and that is our ability to design with confidence, which is the foundation of control mode. The second pillar that we want to talk about is the levers of control. This is about measuring what matters. And when we talk about stop trying to predict the future and instead experimenting to discover it, you have to be able to dive deep into the unbiased truth of what's going on, find out which tactics actually work. So you've got your confident design from the previous section, but now we need to run those tests and analyze them. So yeah, let's measure what matters. As I said, we're working with a load of large and exciting enterprise customers on running these kinds of testing programs. And in doing so, we've found it's just insatiable demand for deeper analysis, custom insights, and crucially, confidence in those results. And so I talked in the previous section about the Metrics Explorer and multi-metrics bucketing. That obviously extends then into multi-metrics analysis. And what that means is being able to run a single test, but analyze its impact on different segments, different data sources, and different kinds of metrics that we might care about. And so, for example, hot button topic, if you're doing GEO, generative engine optimization, you're optimizing for AI search and large language models, then you might want to measure your regular search traffic and the impact on the LLM clicks as well. And we're going to have some case studies, customer stories coming soon around this, but we're certainly anticipating seeing a range of different outcomes, inconclusive, positive, negative, independently of one another. And being able to tease that apart is going to be critical, I think, to a high-performing testing program. And I'm of the opinion that the AI discovery world should fall in the remit of SEO, but we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that every single thing that works in traditional search is going to work in an AI-powered world. And there could be tensions, and there could be trade-offs, and we need to understand that. So that's one kind of multi-metrics analysis. Another one common in our e-commerce customers is to think about merchant center performance. This is Google product search, and it's common here to look at both clicks and impressions, because in merchant center there's this subtlety that an impression often only happens when you actually do the first click that stay within Google. In the things like the popular products grid, you click on the product and it expands it. That's only when an impression is counted. And for many folks that we work with, that lead metric, that things are going to be moving in the right direction, can be very powerful. It's much, much higher volume than actual clicks through to your website. And so you can get to statistical significance and confidence on that more quickly and detect smaller uplifts with greater confidence. And as we break this down and don't just look at average numbers, but look at different channels, look at regular Google search clicks, look at product search clicks, we can again tease apart those potential trade-offs or issues. And then finally, even when we're talking about regular SEO type stuff, we can compare analytics data with GSC data, whether it's clicks, whether it's impressions there as well. And as we do this, it's powerful and important to think about what is your primary metric. And so the way we set up the platform is that you can have multiple metrics that you analyze against and that you can explore, but you nominate a primary one, which is the one that you are mainly going to be using to determine the success or otherwise of an experiment. And we're trying to build the interface to be as powerful and as guided as possible to help us all get to the best kinds of results that we can, to avoid misleading ourselves, and at the same time to give the power to explore, but also remember to stay focused on the metrics that we think are most important. The other kind of diving in that we like to talk about is kind of hidden gem finder, dig beyond the average into segmented analysis. So I pulled up just an example of a mega nav here, and I think thinking about it in the context of navigation can help explain some of what we mean by this. Segmented analysis is about thinking about what's the effect of the test on a department, for example. And often this is an important part of enterprise reporting, that once you've got a test that maybe is a winner across the board, you want to be able to say that it's a plus 8% for this department, plus 6% for that department, and so forth. And this is a crucial part of getting commercial buy-in and maintaining that. The other part of segmented analysis is to drill deeper into the hidden gems, dig beyond the average, and drill into the actual performance at, for example, product category level. This can give additional insights that can be the source of ideas for future test experiments and ideas and ideation, because something that is inconclusive, flat in total on average when you measure it across the board might have winners buried in there because, for example, in a luxury category where it's less price sensitive, or in a different kind of category which is more dependent on reviews or whatever it might be. And typically, if you didn't set up the test to focus on that, it might not be conclusive, but you might get that pointer to say, hey, you know what, actually there might be something here. There might be a hidden gem, and we should maybe run a test specifically to explore that and see if we can just run that one test and get that conclusive result segmented, maybe to a specific section or a specific kind of page. The next insight that triggered what we've been thinking about launching in this area is that it's really hard to communicate these results. They're complicated, they're complex, and it's actually remarkably, embarrassingly easy to mislead even ourselves as we're working on this stuff. And that's the last thing we want to do. It's baked into our core values that we want to be finding the truth and staying curious. Now, you've seen test results that look like this. You've seen them from us and from others. And this fan chart method has become the standard way of visualizing the results of SEO tests kind of around the industry. But the problem with it is that that fan grows outwards over time in basically every test. That's showing that the confidence area is becoming broader around the midline best estimate as we go along. And this is a highly inconclusive test. The range of possibilities here is from about plus 15,000 to minus 7,500 sessions. And the fact that it's simultaneously highly inconclusive and yet looks like a trend is problematic. And so we've been working on a better way to represent this information that shows it more clearly, is less likely to bias us and lead us to psychological traps of making the wrong decisions. And this leads to the box plot. So this box plot is showing the exact same information at this moment in time, at the current date of the test, showing our best estimate and the range of what's going on. And you can very clearly see that this is a highly inconclusive test. And this helps us avoid those imagined trends. So by being able to see test outcomes clearly without bias, we can very quickly tell the difference between an inconclusive test, a negative test, and a positive test, which look like those. And we can avoid some of those psychological traps and report more confidently. Alongside that, we've released into the platform a range of advanced statistics to get full transparency into what's going on with the model and with the estimates and with the test results. And in particular, we get to see the quality of the model, quality of the correlation of the control and variant buckets, and my favorite feature, the volatility index, which tells us how stable this result is looking and whether we should expect it to vary over time. And this is a very good indicator of whether to keep a test running or call it now. And when something is highly stable, it helps you move your team from trust me to trust the data. This is some of the stuff that, I'm a geek, but this is some of the stuff I'm most excited about. Moving from this kind of single black box to multi-dimensional, transparent view of the impact. And it gives you so much more control. So in this section, what we've seen is the support for multi-metrics and modern traffic sources, whether it's Merchant Center, LLM traffic, or whatever else. The segmented analysis that lets you look at it by department, by category, and so forth. The box plots charts that help us avoid those biased visuals and the psychological traps that come with them. And the advanced stats that help us build that trust in the data. So in the final pillar of what I wanted to talk about today, we have the ways we scale these learnings. And this is all about embedding the lessons of the testing program into the business as a whole and scaling away from one-off wins into program results, about building a systematic, scalable program that builds unshakable cumulative value, about embedding testing into the organization and building that experimentation ecosystem. So again, a couple of insights to talk about here. The first is that insights are like gold dust. Ideation is really hard. Coming up with good hypotheses is really difficult. And any advantage in this area is extremely valuable. And this is probably the single thing that we've identified most powerfully that our large customers are most desperate for, and it's hardest to give them. How can we figure out what's most likely to work in future, what's been working, how can we come up with better test ideas? So the key feature that we're releasing around this is test tagging. And by tagging experiments with everything from what kind of test was it, what hypothesis were we running, what pages were we running it on, what elements of the page were we changing, a very flexible tagging system, we're then able to report against those tags and see the experiments filtered and sorted by the different kinds of experiments they were, the different kind of hypotheses they were. And this solves the trapped data problem. It turns your unsearchable archive of tests into a more organized knowledge library and helps you build your strategy dashboard. For the first time, you can now see positive outcome percentage for types of test and build your prioritization skills, get smarter over time. And the longer you run the testing program, the more these insights develop and the more powerful this all becomes. And as I say, ideation is the weakest part of many testing programs, and anything we can do to get better insights and build more robust feedback loops from the tests that we're running today to the ideas we're going to have tomorrow, the better off we'll be, and the more we'll be able to beat our competition. And finally, we have the repeated realization that everyone we work with in the enterprise needs to slice and dice their program metrics. They need to report on different things. They need to integrate with other teams' reporting systems. A very common use case that we see is that there are multiple experimentation teams, not just SEO, right? Other experimentation teams. There's often a testing council or steering group, and they need to report in the same way. So they need to pull all of this data into each other's systems or into one system. And this is how you play well with other teams. So we're bringing the SearchPilot API to life. And in the API, we get the integration ability to report on all of those things that we've been talking about, whether it's the tagging data that we just looked at, whether it's win rates, whether it's scales of uplift or confidence intervals, or the statistics that we were referring to. And by building a simple API, we can, first of all, run it in the platform in interactive mode, figure out the API calls that we need, and then get full access to all of these metrics that we've been talking about today programmatically and integrate them into the ecosystem of reporting within the organization that you're working with. We also have all the documentation on how to access the rules, the experiments, the results, the statistics of everything that we've discussed. And it's supplied with a Python wrapper, which makes it easy to install and easy to work with, for example, in Colab notebooks and the like, or Python in a local system. And I am personally very excited to start seeing what our team and your team can start building with this reporting capability. So in this final pillar, we've looked at experiment tagging. We've looked at the meta-analysis capabilities that creates. And we've looked at the integration and API possibilities that mean that we can collaborate across teams and with experimentation around the organization. It's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and it's the first time we've really done a product launch like this. I expect we'll do more again in the future, but I'd love to hear your feedback. And there's so much that the team has been working on that has all previously been launched, and maybe we haven't made a big enough deal of, and we haven't shouted about enough, because I'm super proud of what the SearchPilot team has been building. It's really amazing to hear from some of these huge brands that we're getting to work with, hearing them say things like, I can't imagine running an SEO team without SearchPilot, or we couldn't get the results that we're looking for without your help. And so there's so much that hasn't made it into this product launch, whether it's the new deployment options. So we now have what we call Jetstream, which allows SearchPilot to be deployed at the edge on compatible CDNs like Cloudflare and Fastly. We've got Googlebot tracking and analysis built into the platform. We have technology we call BrowserKit, which helps to keep front-end changes in sync with the server-side changes that we're making, even with modern front-end JavaScript libraries in play. And the team has worked incredibly hard on all of the enterprise compliance and security infrastructure that underpins all of this, including the ISO 27001 compliance, similar to SOC 2, that enables us to breeze through all of those enterprise security requirements that can hold up and delay or even prevent the ability to work together in too many environments. So we've worked super hard on all of this stuff, and I'm kind of the bloodied and bruised face of all of this, but I didn't build any of it. All of the shout out goes to our hardworking teams in the product and engineering side of the business, as well as in the professional services team, who often are at the pointy end of figuring out what our customers really need, building them the prototypes or helping them solve their problems and feeding that into that process so that the talented engineers can build all of the stuff that you've seen today. So Thank you. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here and you'd like to see more, you can email me directly. I'm will.critchlow@searchpilot.com. And you can also find me on social. You can find SearchPilot on social. You follow us there, you'll get all of our test results and latest case studies and stories about all of the work that we're doing. And join us on this kind of rocket ship of a journey as we hopefully revolutionize the way that SEO is done, as we take it from react mode into control mode. So thank you for your time today. I hope you've enjoyed this run through of the latest features in the SearchPilot product, as well as all of the lessons and thinking that have led us to build things this way. And I look forward to hearing more from all of you. Take care.